Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Impact Teams Radio. I'm Tony Sherman, your host and guide. And today we're going to pick up very specifically on a theme that's been occurring over the last couple of months with our interviews. And to help me with that theme, we have Tim Hagen, who is the creator of the Progress Coaching Systems. So first of all, thank you very much, Tim, for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. So the reason, guys, that I've asked Tim on the show, and he's been gracious enough to come, was you guys know I do a lot of reading on LinkedIn, and I came across an article he did called The Perfect Coaching Formula. And I really thought, based on the feedback I'm getting and based on some of the information and some of the insights that we're getting from previous people that have been on here, VPs of large corporations, small corporations, a lot of them are talking about the power of coaching. And if you remember, we go all the way back to Rick, when Rick was telling us about that he's a business coach and what he does with executives. And I thought maybe this is something that Tim can shed the value of coaching and who should be getting coaching in business and how we can approach it. So I'll be talking to Tim about coaching. But first of all, let me step away from the mic like I usually do and just say, Tim, welcome. And could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. And I appreciate being on the show, Tony. One of the things that I've been coaching for the past 25 years, and I actually coined myself the Chief Coaching Officer of our company. And we've been in the business of teaching managers how to coach. And my passion really comes way back when to in my early 20s when I started to coach youth sports. So one of my great claims to fame is I coached a volleyball team that went from a record of 3-57 to 91-4 in 3 years. And here I am 20-some years later, and I still keep in touch with all those kids that are either coaching or still participating in the sport. So I caught the bug of coaching, and coaching is really, for me, is something that we do every single day. And I always share this with people. You're either coaching people at your companies to stay, or you're coaching your employees at your company to leave. But a lot of times we make the assumption we're coaching when, in fact, we're sending off messages of disengagement and things like that. So my background is adult education from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I got involved with youth sports and coaching, and I started to have my career manifest itself into a combination of not only coaching, but also technology. Our company actually uses a great deal of homegrown technology to facilitate our programs. So I'm a technology enthusiast by nature. I got a wife and 2 kids. One of which I'm going to be coaching in the first year of our high school program's volleyball program. And this will be the second time I've coached him. My kids' names are Liam and Bridget. My wife's name is Beth.
Wow, that was thorough and very insightful. Thank you very much, Tim, for taking the time.
Sure.
So, Tim, we always like to see, have you got a quote ready, something that you can share that will shape the conversation, if you will?
Absolutely. And this is going to be Tony, and bear with me, this is probably going to come off as one of the most pompous, arrogant things I could ever do, but the fact of the matter, I'm going to use my own quote. It's on all my own business cards, and that is, if you invest in other people, they will ultimately invest in themselves. You're never going to have an employee walk into a boss's office and say, boy, Tony, do you have any uncomfortable change today? I've got to kind of get out of my comfort zone, and boy, if we could role play to really get me sweating, I sure would appreciate it. So the whole point of my quote is, if we invest in other people, they will ultimately take the next step. But very few people will take it upon themselves to do that.
That makes a lot of sense. As you're saying that, Tim, I'm thinking about a joke that I read recently where the CFO walks into the CEO's office and says, what happens if we keep investing in our people and they leave? And the CEO says, well, what happens if we don't and they stay?
I saw the same quote.
Yep, and there you go. And it just resonated with me. I was probably doing some searching on business coaches and looking at that time. And it just that pretty much sums it up,
Absolutely.
Doesn't it? So we always like to start with a success story. So let me ask you, as you look over the arc of your career and your experience in coaching people, what are some of the real wins that you hold dear to yourself, and why, and what do they teach you about leadership?
Well, and I think the first one was myself as the coaching student, if you will. I grew up, as I told you, with some sports, and I ended up going to IBM. And I left. I'm nationally certified in exercise physiology, and so I was really out of my comfort zone. Knew nothing about technology. Was in the same office building, albeit years ago in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I started to realize that I wanted to do something more. I ended up joining IBM, and within our first 3 weeks, I was literally, Tony, in tears. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. We used to set up these big projection units and set up for technology demos, and I just didn't know what I was doing. And I went into my boss's office, Martha, and I said, Martha, this isn't for me. I'm out of my league. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I don't even know what anyone's talking about. And make a long story short, one of the things I was confused by was something called RGB cables. I didn't know how to set them up to a projection unit. And I ended up getting hooked up to a gentleman by the name of Roberto. And Roberto, knew how to speak in very good layman's terms. And he said, do you know what RGB stands for? I said, I have no idea. All these other guys in electrical engineering are talking about, currents and electrical fluency. I have no idea. He said, Tim, it stands for red, green, blue. You just have to match up the colors. So I got angry. And my first lesson, I went back into my boss's office and I told her what occurred. And she said, look, I'm going to give you 6 months. If you want to go back, you can go back to your old job. But give it 6 months. And I want you to keep a journal and write down one thing you've learned every single day. And every week we're going to sit down. So for the next 2.5 years, we sat down and had a conversation. By the time I left, all the guys who had higher grade points, all the guys that were teaching or that knew electrical engineering and knew all the technology, they were still doing grunt work. I ended up creating and or teaching 11 different courses on my own. And I remember that message, that I had a boss who believed in me. I had a boss who asked me questions about frustrations, anxieties, and she didn't give up on me because I was very quick to give up on myself. And so that's the first one I would share with you. And I don't say that because I think I'm better than other people, or I say that in direct correlation that other people could not have done what I did. That wasn't the point. She deserves the credit because she took the time with a college student, a college co-op, when many people would not do that. Now, this is 27 years later. I still keep in touch with her somewhat to this day. The second one I remember is a young lady who is here in Wisconsin, and one of the things that I always love to share this story is as I get very acclimated to my own business and teaching managers how to coach, and at one point teaching and coaching employees directly. We had a young lady by the name of Melinda, and the owner of this company said, well, let's get everyone together and we'll have a role play. And we were really changing the customer service and sales foundation of the company. And I said, Ty, I don't think we should do that. Some of these people have never done it. This is a very daunting, intimidating experience. For whatever reason, role play can really crumble people. So we end up doing it anyways against my better judgment and through the advice of my client. And this young lady said, could I go first? But I could tell she wasn't nervous. This wasn't, I want to go first because I'm excited. I want to go first to get this over with.
Yep, smart lady.
Absolutely. And she turned that to one of the owners, and she was ready to start the role play. And I'd say about 20 shades of dark apple red came over her face. She looked at me and she said, can I turn around? And I said, sure. What do you mean turn around? She said, I want to put my face against the wall. I said, why? She said, I don't think I can look at him. This is inside sales. That's okay, right? I said, well, sure, go ahead. The role play commences, and it looked kind of funny, and some people in the room were chuckling. There were about 20 people, and the role play ends. And she turns around and she looks at me, and she has tears rolling down her face, streaming down her face. And I said, are you okay? And she nods. You could see the lump in her throat. Everybody in that room started to look at me. And I said, boy, is there anything I can do to help you? And she shook her head no. And she finally got up the gumption to say, she goes, how did I do? And I learned a great lesson. At that moment, if I had said, oh, it was really good, don't let that bother you, you did awesome, I would have lost the trust of the 20 people in that room because it was terrible. So what I did at that moment, I looked at her and I said, look, here's the thing. I'm going to answer in two parts. One, it was really bad. I got to tell you, that was about as bad as it gets, as everybody in the room looked at me and thought, this guy's the biggest jerk in the world. I said, but here's the question, Melinda. What did you learn about yourself that you're the most proud of? And she said, I think I can do this. I said, do you know how much courage it took to come in here and do what you just did and the way you feel right now? Do you have any idea how many people would have stopped and just caved in and given up? I said, I'm really proud of you. That doesn't mean next time it's going to be easier. It'll get easier over time. I promise you that. She is now the manager of a customer service department of 20 to 30 employees. She's gone through our coaching program, no fear of role playing. She does speaking. And I remember when we talk in coaching about defining moments, I didn't coach to the result of what she did because it was awful. But I had to coach to the psychology of, is she going to continue to make effort? With effort comes progress. With progress ultimately comes the desired results we see as managers and leaders. But if I had harped on, like most managers, well, I was okay, but what you should have done, I would have made her feel even worse than what she did. That was literally about 9-10 years ago. Till this day, she's a client. She's a friend. She's an absolute fantastic coach. So those are just, as I went through my own little episode getting coaching, I've been allowed in my career to transcend that and help other people do the same thing.
Both of those are very, very powerful stories. But that second one, yeah, it's very hard when you're in a room like that to do the right thing at the right time immediately. So I'm amazed. I'm amazed at the story. It's very powerful. Thank you, Tim.
Sure.
So, Tim, as you look at your successes, they obviously are very powerful, and they've shown you the power of coaching going forward. And especially that first one with the manager in IBM, the thought that struck me when we were talking about that one was, I can see going to the manager, and I can almost see them, saying, "Hey, hang in there, keep a diary." But in your experience in lots and lots of different companies, how frequently do you find it that a manager is willing to invest in somebody on a weekly basis ongoing? Because that was the thought that struck me, was the value of that was that she was willing to invest in you on a weekly basis. Now, it's probably only 15 minutes, half an hour every week, but that's still a lot of time. And I know that I've worked with very busy managers, and I would feel guilty about taking half an hour of time on something like that every week. But she appeared to see that as an investment.
Yeah, I would tell you this. I think going back to that, she took the time and energy where I probably wouldn't have. And at one point, she even caught me walking the opposite end of the building to get to my desk so I didn't have to go by her office, because my association of always being in her office was negative. And I remember something that she said to me. She said, "Why do you think I bring you in here?" And I had translated it much like corporate America does today. When somebody says, "Tony, I need to see you in my office right away," what's the employee's typical response?
I just had it.
Yeah, I'm in trouble. What did I do wrong? So we've cultivated that as a leadership community. The reprimand, the punitive, the feedback, the negative feedback, the constructive feedback. We rarely bring people in for the good things. So when she said to me, going on almost 30 years ago, she said, "I bring you in here because you're willing to accept it, you're willing to invest in yourself, and you put your ego aside for the betterment of your career. I'll work with someone like that any day of the week." So my relationship with that issue of being in that office went from highly negative to very much about career development. But shame on me for having that perception. So to answer your question, I would say 3 to 5 years ago, Tony, what we typically got in our industry of going out and teaching managers how to coach is, "I don't have time. I don't have time." Coaching has started to resonate, whether it's life coaching, executive coaching. What we do is we teach managers how to coach. There's 15,000 different versions of what coaching is. But we go back to one fundamental thing, is we look at people will not arbitrarily get better. So when a sales leader gets in front of a sales team and says, "Come on, guys, we're running 10% behind. We got to get our numbers up." Well, that's insulting because they know they have to get their numbers up. Or the classic, "Don't let that angry customer bother you." So what I call the rhetorical management mandate doesn't work. If it did, we wouldn't have a training or coaching industry. So the way we define coaching is really a two-step process. One, it's about getting people to look in the mirror. Two, it's about taking action on number one. Very few people do number one. So one of my famous, and if I could just share with you a great story about a young sales professional. And
yes,
I was in a meeting, and I was sitting next to the president, and this young guy's manager was sitting across from me and said, I'm going to let so-and-so go this week. And they said, oh, that's too bad. I said, I really like him. How come? Well, he's just not cutting it. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, why isn't he cutting it? Well, his numbers are at 71% of goal. I said, why are his numbers at 71% of goal? And at this point, the president turns to me and goes, Tim, what is your problem? I said, well, my problem is we're about to fire a kid who's going to go kicking and screaming, and I'm not so sure we know why. And I looked back at the manager, and the manager said, well, I just don't think he's wired for sales. And I said, well, could you explain for everyone in the room what good wiring looks like? Well, he didn't know. So what we were really firing him on is his lack of success. So I said to the president, let's just tell everyone when they interview here that if you don't hit your numbers, we fire you right away. How many people do you think will want to work here? So let's be honest with ourselves. And all of a sudden he goes, what are you suggesting? I said, what if we looked at this kid? What if we looked at him differently and turned him around? Wouldn't that be an incredible success story? Now, the funny thing about it, Tony, is this guy from across the table is looking at me, and if he had a gun, I wouldn't be on your radio show right now. He is livid. But what I did is I sat down with this young guy, and I recouped his job. And I told him, I said, I'm going to ask you some questions. I've offered myself up to help you. I've offered myself to coach you, but I want to be very blunt with you. You are sitting here right now as a result of me fighting for you. Why are your sales low? 23-year-old kid goes, my manager sucks. Excuse the language. Of course, every 23-year-old knows what his manager should be doing. I said, well, outside of your manager. He said, this company has no idea how to market themselves. This is a company that was up 15 to 18 percentage points every single year. That was not the issue. So I use what I call a technique called reflective coaching. I said, look, you need to be honest with yourself so you can be honest with me. I'm going to go get us a soda. And in the next 10 minutes, you're going to have an epiphany of integrity and honesty with yourself. And you're going to share with me why your numbers are down. If I hear anything that is other than what is specific to you, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to leave and you will not be employed here. Now, I share that. Part of the story, and I'll finish it here in a second, is as a skilled coach, I was not uncomfortable addressing that because I knew I was doing it for the betterment of him. Was he uncomfortable? Absolutely. I was not uncomfortable. So I get up and I walk away. I come back and he's slouched over. His shirt's now untucked. It looks like there's a little bit of sweat. And I said to myself, boy, this is going to be easier than I thought. And I said, what'd you come up with? And he goes, I got a pretty bad attitude. I said, yeah, where does that come from? He said, why are you excited about my bad attitude? I said, I'm not excited about your bad attitude. I'm excited about working with you because you're finally being honest with yourself. What are you willing to do to change it? He said, I guess whatever it takes. I said, awesome. For the next 6 months, you're not allowed to use the word marketing or manager, or I'm going to recommend your termination. So I used a little humor. The end of the story is, his first 4 weeks, I had him do something that had nothing to do with sales. I had him perform one weekly random act of kindness because everybody in the company didn't like the guy. The manager calls me and goes, this is stupid. I said, why? He goes, he's serving everybody in the unit pizza. And I said, well, how are people reacting to him? He said, well, they're sitting there talking with him and they're laughing. I said, yeah. And he goes, that's what you wanted. I said, right. He needs help from other people than just you and me. The end of the story is his numbers went from 71 to 119%. For the next 4 years at the same company. He's still employed there. His numbers have not been below 112%.
Great story. I tell you what, I would have reached down this microphone and shook you hard if you hadn't finished the story today.
Well,
you had me riveted. No, you had me riveted. If you'd have been like, oh, gotta go, my next appointment's arrived. I would have found you. And I don't even know where Milwaukee is on a map, but I would have found you. Okay, so we're going to run out of time very, very quickly here. So normally we ask for people to share a few losses, but I actually want to skip over that. And I just want to ask you, in the last 2 to 5 minutes that we've got, how did you grow as a leader and somebody who can help people become leaders of leaders? How did you grow that skill set? Where did your mentoring... Let me ask a blunt question. Do you have a coach?
Yes.
Or have you had coaches?
Yeah, I have 2 coaches. One is my business partner who is a retired executive in Scottsdale, Arizona. He is an investor in our company, and I probably talk to him 3 to 4 times a week. I think at the ripe age of 40, he's completely retired, doesn't need to work, but has been invaluable in my life. I also have a personal coach that I meet with every Friday morning, every other Friday morning, by the name of Scott, who works with a great organization, Joe Abraham, which would be great for your radio show, by the way, the Entrepreneurial DNA. And he coaches me based on what is called the Bossy assessment. So I'm highly innovative, and so it gives you kind of a set of attributes unique to that person, and it's been phenomenal. So I think what's made me successful is really 2 things. 1, I'm willing to be coached. And let me say 3 things. 2, I'm willing to practice the craft. I am constantly researching, practicing, strategizing, innovating ways to coach and develop people better. I do not profess to have all the answers. So one of the frustrating things about working with me is I'm always building and creating new solutions. My employees hate me at times. The third thing is I think I'm willing to learn. I think the minute that leaders feel like they have the answers, and they're not being approached or coached or mentored, they tend to fall in love with everything that comes out of their mouth. So I go back all the way to Martha at IBM, and I still to this day, 27 years later, remember the rooms we were in, the conversations we had, because she as a leader took it upon herself. So I, at my company, in payback to IBM, I till this day have high school and college interns who blog for us. And I mentor them. I take them to client sites. They've been hired by our clients as my payback and reciprocation to my IBM days. So I think what's helped me is I look back and I don't forget where I came from, but I leverage it and use it going forward.
Wow. You just gave me the title for this episode, A Coach Who Walks the Talk. That is brilliant. Thank you very much, Tim.
Sure.
So, Tim, we've run out of time this week. I just want to thank you very much for being a powerful guest on the show. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to invite you back and do a deep dive. And maybe I can see on LinkedIn that you've got yourself as the creator of the Progress Coaching System. Maybe we can take a look at that and some of the other things that you've raised on this episode and do a deeper dive on that. Would you be open for that?
Would love to.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim. So this is Tony Sherman. We've had a powerful, enjoyable 20 minutes here with Tim Hagen, the creator of the Progress Coaching System. So there's plenty of good ideas in there. And I think the overarching idea is the idea of having your own coach. So think about that in the week ahead. And until next week, this is Tony Sherman, your host and guide. Wishing you a great week.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.